Ever wonder if, seemingly random events in your life or maybe even in the world around us actually follow some kind of hidden logic? What if there were these, underlying universal blueprints, shaping not just the physical world, but our social structures, even our individual experiences in ways we hardly ever stop to think about? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into exactly that. We're exploring a really fascinating perspective that connects karma, universal design patterns, and, well, how we fundamentally interact with the very fabric of reality itself. And our journey for this exploration, it draws from a truly unique YouTube discussion. It's this rich tapestry, sort of weaving together concepts from Vedic philosophy, modern biology, programming, and a deeply philosophical view of existence. So our mission for you, our listener, is to help you maybe uncover some surprising connections within all this material, giving you a fresh, maybe new lens to view the complexity of the world through, and hopefully offering some genuine aha moments you might not expect. Okay, so let's maybe unpack this with a concept many of us think we understand. Karma.
Most people, right, when they hear that word, they probably picture a simple cause and effect.
Yeah.
What goes around comes around, or some kind of personal cosmic payback. If you put out evil, you get back evil, that kind of thing. But the source material we're looking at, it immediately challenges this conventional understanding. It draws a really crucial distinction between karma and destiny.
That's exactly right. The core insight here, well, the source explains destiny as your predetermined end result, something all life ultimately shares, regardless of its path. Karma, though, that's different. That's what actually rules during the life itself. It's the intricate mechanism governing the events, the interactions, the consequences you experience as you navigate your path. It's really about the journey, not just the final destination.
And this idea of karma, it gets even bigger, more expansive. The source introduces a concept that kind of stretches beyond just individual actions, suggesting karma can extend into what it actually calls group karma. So this isn't just about one person's isolated choices anymore, but how an entire collective, a whole group, can be deeply affected by karmic forces that get activated within it.
It's a really profound shift in perspective, isn't it? The material uses a striking example, discussing how actions attributed to a powerful subset within a group, specifically in the context of certain events by some Israelis in Gaza, according to the source, how those actions could potentially activate collective karmic consequences for the broader group itself.
Right. And crucially, the source clarifies this. It isn't necessarily about every single individual within that larger group consciously creating the situation, right?
Yeah.
It's more suggesting that a wider collective impact gets activated by a smaller but, highly influential subset within the group.
Exactly. And this subset, according to the source material, operates from a deeply ingrained framework. One that, and I'm quoting the material here, views non-members, or goy, as cattle. But the source emphasizes this isn't necessarily like a personal failing in the usual sense. It's presented more as a mindset that is inculcated into the social order they're born into. Their minds are essentially trained within that specific, quite narrow framework. It characterizes these individuals as prisoners of their own mind, acting reactively, driven by what the source describes as bloodlust and brainwashing, without much imagination or foresight.
So, okay, in essence, the source is saying these individuals can't be blamed in the traditional sense because this worldview is just so deeply embedded. And the source draws this really stark contrast between these reactive individuals described in, pretty strong terms as beasts and what it calls thinking humans, or sometimes actually quite affectionately, woo people. It's not meant dismissively here, apparently. It seems to describe those capable of intuitively grasping these deeper, maybe non-material realities, people who can move beyond their immediate identity and circumstances. So, okay, what's the core insight here for you listening? Understanding karma beyond just individual actions, it really expands our view of collective responsibility and influence in the world, doesn't it? It suggests our fates and experiences are maybe far more intertwined than we often imagine, and that the underlying mindsets within a group can have these profound, really far-reaching effects. Right, building on this idea of interconnectedness, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. What if the universe itself actually has a playbook? Like a set of highly efficient design patterns it just reuses again and again across all levels of existence. The core idea from the source is basically that the universe operates on these patterns for maximum efficiency, constantly rediscovering and reapplying successful solutions to fundamental challenges life faces.
Yeah, it's almost like a master programmer, The source uses that exact analogy. Programmers rely on established design patterns to build efficient, scalable, robust code. It saves tons of time, stops them reinventing the wheel constantly. Although the material does note that maybe with advanced AI, this human need to discover and apply patterns might lessen a bit. But for the universe itself, it seems to be a fundamental, ongoing principle of creation. It's not just about what works, but what works elegantly and efficiently.
That concept, yeah, becomes much clearer when we look at a concrete example. I was really struck by the source's breakdown of something as seemingly straightforward as, well, the evolution of flight. How does that demonstrate this idea of the universe reusing solutions?
Well, the source posits that life's inherent desire, or maybe an energetic push to achieve flight, led to a few fundamental, highly effective solutions, primarily the wing. Now, the first iteration, according to this source, involved leathery wings. We see those in ancient creatures like pterodactyls, right? It even mentions they had a kind of fuzz, maybe for aerodynamics. Once this basic effective solution was sort of discovered by the universe, it was essentially shelved, filed away as a successful design pattern.
Wow. And it didn't just forget about it then. That pattern, the source explains, was later adopted and refined by bats, using the exact same underlying structure, leathery, stretchy, thin membranes between rigid, hollow members. It's like the universe, in a way, just pulled a proven solution from its library and reapplied it.
Exactly. Then came this evolutionary leap with birds. Feathers developed from this existing pattern. And what's fascinating is the source points out that feathers took over the functions of air resistance and lift, which then allowed the skin structure itself to become much thinner, much lighter. So it's not presented as a completely new invention from scratch. It's more like an evolution of a previously successful design pattern, making it even more effective.
Okay, that's a really compelling argument for reuse. But, for someone coming from a purely Darwinian perspective, they might just say, well, this is just convergent evolution at play. Similar environmental pressures leading to similar solutions independently. Does the source address that distinction? How does it differentiate between these intelligent design patterns and just, well, purely random evolutionary convergence?
That's a really crucial point, yeah, and the source definitely gets into that. It argues that while, sure, convergent evolution explains how solutions are refined and selected over time, the initial tendency towards developing these efficient patterns in the first place, or maybe the universe stumbling upon them with such consistency, that itself suggests an underlying intelligence or bias in the system. It's almost as if there's a kind of universal operating system that prioritizes and reuses these effective blueprints, rather than just purely random mutations happening to lead to similar outcomes by chance. The enduring principle, the source suggests, is that if, hypothetically, all life were wiped out and then reemerged on Earth, it would likely start with those kind of things again. The patterns are that fundamental.
So this raises a pretty important question for you listening.
Yeah.
What if this efficiency, this apparent intelligent design, isn't just a human concept we project onto things, but maybe a fundamental principle embedded in the very fabric of reality itself, showing us a hidden, perhaps profound order?
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these universal design patterns, they seem to extend beyond just biology. They go right into human social orders. A reality that, the source argues, was recognized in many ancient traditions. It specifically points to their presence in Vedic literature, things like the Bhagavad Gita, and also in Buddhist texts. These aren't presented as just religious doctrines, though. The source suggests they were actually really attempts to describe fundamental design patterns within life and social organization, even if, maybe, through what it calls a reductionist view of the full reality.
Okay, so these traditions, the source explains, categorize society into 4 fundamental groups, or varnas. And it argues that pretty much all societies can be divided into these, outside of a direct God aspect, let's say. First, you have the priests, which is a broad category, right? Including teachers, intellectuals, philosophers, basically those who provide wisdom and guidance. Then come the warriors. And again, not just soldiers in the military sense, also administrators, rulers, protectors of the social order. They provide the structure, the defense. Okay, next we have the merchants. And this is described as a really expansive, productive class. It includes farmers, traders, craftspeople, producers, essentially anyone who facilitates markets, creates goods, drives economic activity.
Right. And finally, the laborers, the foundational group that supports the entire system. They provide the physical work, the effort that underpins all the other activities. But the source emphasizes these aren't just like superficial divisions we make up. They are fundamental design patterns, all working through karma, within a reality that's understood fundamentally as vibration and consciousness.
That's fascinating, this idea of reality itself being vibration and consciousness. Can you elaborate a bit on what the source means by vibration here? Is it like quantum physical vibration or something more like a fundamental energetic state of being that underpins everything?
Exactly. It seems to be more the latter. The source posits it's less about the specific physics of wave mechanics and more about a foundational energetic resonance, like a constant hum or frequency that constitutes existence itself and influences everything from matter to thought. It's presented as a deeper energetic reality, and the source critiques what it calls gritologists, or maybe small minds, because they get stuck thinking that only matter stuff, the physical world, is supreme. They fail to perceive or appreciate this underlying vibrational reality, and this limited worldview, according to the source, makes them miss the intricate design patterns that are actually shaping everything around us.
Right. And this vibrational understanding, it means these social patterns, they actually transcend other human subdivisions we focus on, like race. The source uses examples like white people, black people, or even hypothetical green people and blue people. The point being made is that individuals within these different outward groups can still relate through a shared vibration. So, for instance, a hypothetical blue guy who embodies the warrior vibration would intuitively relate to someone else operating from that same warrior vibration, regardless of their skin color or other superficial differences. It's about the underlying energetic pattern.
Mm-hmm. And this framework also highlights the profound significance of humanity's unique, vast internal variation, which is something we often take for granted. Consider a thought experiment the source poses. Imagine a planet where a single dominant species, let's say chimpanzees just for example, evolved with basically no internal variance. Every individual looks and acts almost identically.
Okay, and such a species, if they were to encounter humanity, with all our vast differences in appearance, temperament, abilities, wow, they might perceive our variation as a kind of disease or something fundamentally alien and threatening, wouldn't they? The source suggests they would react very badly, potentially seeking to eliminate variance, making them, as the source puts it, a dangerous kind of a mind to deal with. What stands out to you about this idea? This framework really does offer a profound way to understand social structures, doesn't it? And maybe to appreciate the unique, intricate complexity of human existence and the deep vibrational connections we might share beyond just outward appearances. Yeah, that thought experiment really does highlight the profound importance of human variation and the intricate complexity we bring to existence. But if we as individuals are so unique, how does our consciousness navigate these universal patterns and social architectures? This leads us into the source's really fascinating insights into the fundamental mechanics of the soul and our experience of reality itself.
Right, moving into these deeper mechanics. The source describes the soul not as some static thing, but more like a container for your consciousness. And this container is reused across many lives. However, what's interesting, and maybe counterintuitive, is that consciousness itself is wiped clean with each new birth, essentially starting fresh each time.
Okay, that immediately brings up the concept of an old soul, right? If consciousness is wiped clean, how does one become an old soul?
Yeah, good question. The source explains that the soul itself, the container, carries wisdom and intuition, which it describes as kind of deep memory, or maybe a database from all those previous lives. And this intuition, this deep memory, is accessible even if the current day-to-day consciousness is technically young. So an old soul isn't really about how many years you've lived in this body, but the depth of that underlying database the soul carries. The source even suggests that over a lifetime, an individual might start out with the vibrational profile of, say, a young soul, maybe in a category like laborer, and then by consciously accessing their intuition, they can actually reposition themselves into some of these other categories as they begin to embody more of that old soul nature.
So what does this all mean in a practical sort of societal sense? The source makes a really compelling argument for the Western concept of freedom, actually. It suggests that the Western ideal of freedom and a more classless society, the idea that anyone can be anything they want, is, according to this view, precisely designed to allow this relocation, this movement from one social class or vibrational pattern to another. This fluidity is seen as facilitating the soul's natural progression, unlike maybe more rigid, birth-determined systems found elsewhere in the world.
And connecting back to our earlier discussion, remember that beast warrior, the one described as reactive, not thinking, back in segment 1. Well, through this lens, they might represent a young soul, or perhaps a laborer class warrior who lacks the quality or discrimination of mind that an old soul warrior might possess. The priest viewpoint, which remember includes intellectuals and teachers, generally sees upward progress towards that priest class as the embodiment of higher wisdom and understanding. It's a sort of developmental path.
Right. And underpinning all of this is karma, which, as we discussed, is reiterated here as basically the expression of the event stream.
Hmm.
But then the source takes a really deep dive into something even more fundamental, challenging our everyday understanding of now.
Hmm.
It clarifies that now isn't simply a static space where events just happen.
This is truly mind-bending stuff. The source describes now as, get this, a perception of yourself observing and being impacted by the event emerging out of the event stream into your awareness. So the event itself and your personal experience of now are inextricably linked, which makes it, as the source says, even trickier understanding now than it is understanding time. It's not just a passive background, it's an active personal process of perception.
Wow, okay. That's a lot to unpack. So if I'm getting this right, our now isn't some fixed point on a timeline, but a deeply personal, active perception created by an event hitting our awareness. It almost makes you rethink every single moment, doesn't it? And the source takes this even further, suggesting that we humans don't even perceive reality at its true, incredibly fast refresh rate. What does it mean by that?
It's a really intriguing idea, yeah. The source estimates reality's true refresh rate at an absolutely astonishing 22 trillion times per second. We simply can't consciously process information that fast. And it suggests there's also variability in these refresh rates across different systems, including consciousness itself, which interestingly links back to that concept of young and old souls perhaps relating to their capacity to perceive more or less of this underlying incredibly fast reality. This is why the source heavily critiques what it calls the gritologist paradigm, that whole idea that matter is supreme and consciousness is just some kind of accident. It views that as so fundamentally flawed.
Okay, so what are some of the key points the source uses to illustrate just how flawed this gritologist matter-first view might be?
Well, it points to certain scientific observations, like the puzzling absence of highly entropic galaxies in large astronomical surveys. If the universe were purely material and just winding down according to entropy, you'd arguably expect to see more obvious signs of decay on that scale, but instead we observe incredible organization. It also offers a radically different interpretation of cosmological redshift. The source suggests it isn't purely about the Doppler effect of things moving away in space, but might be related to bands within the consciousness. Think of it almost as if our consciousness itself acts like a kind of filter, or maybe a radio dial, only allowing us to perceive certain frequencies or aspects of the total reality. What we call redshift might be partly related to how those conscious filters operate at vast distances.
Wow. Okay, and this mind-bending view leads to an even more profound concept. That our reality isn't fixed until we look at it. That it's more like a giant probability cloud that only solidifies into an actual event when we perceive it. Can you walk us through how that works?
Absolutely. Imagine reality existing prior to observation as just an infinite sea of possibilities, a vast quantum-like field. And that field only collapses into the specific concrete event right in front of us as we observe it in our personal now.
Mm.
And this has huge implications for how karma works. It means karmic repercussions aren't always simple, linear, or immediate. Sure, they can be instant, you kick a light bulb that breaks right then, but maybe more often karma can radiate out into this vast probability cloud and then return to impact us much later, coalescing into an event in the future now. So, for example, a past act of violence could sort of ripple through this probability field, eventually leading to conditions that result in, say, a present arrest years down the line. It's not framed as punishment, but more like the inevitable emergence of a collapsed probability that aligns energetically with the previous input into the field.
This whole view of now, of consciousness, of karma, operating within this probability cloud, it offers a completely different lens, doesn't it? A way to understand reality and your active, unique place within it. It fundamentally suggests you are far, far more than just your current identity or circumstances. Wow. Okay, we've truly taken a deep dive today, haven't we? We've unpacked karma from its individual form all the way to its profound group implications. We explored the universe's seemingly efficient design patterns in everything from the evolution of flight to the basic architecture of human society. And then we really dived into the deep mechanics souls being reused, the potential purpose of Western freedom in that soul journey, and this elusive active nature of now as a personal perception emerging from an event string.
And it's worth remembering the source's crucial point here, that reality is complex, not merely complicated. There's a difference. It's not about just deciphering simple equations, maybe. It's more about training our minds to see the interconnected components within that vast complexity, allowing us to better interact with and understand the intricate dance of existence we seem to be part of.
So here's a final thought for you to maybe carry with you. If karma, the event stream, and this probability cloud are so fundamentally intertwined with our conscious perception, how might understanding these universal design patterns actually help you consciously engage with principles like, say, the law of attraction or the rule of assumption? Could it help you more actively shape your own experiences within this constantly unfolding reality? That's a truly provocative thought, I think. Something to mull over and perhaps explore further in your own deep dive.